And obviously, we're still getting a lot of reaction to that debate, and we still have a number of guests here. And the way we still do have that round table there, Michelle, with some of our guests sitting there and standing by to take us through. But now we bring you the conversation. We take you back here in the country, in Cape Town, where we are joined by Jill Greenberg. And Jill Greenberg is the communication and political strategist, and she joins us now. Jill, thank you very much, and welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Now, looking at this debate and the first presidential debate, obviously we had more points coming across in this debate. Do you think that both candidates took advantage of this debate, and they were more convincing than their presidential counterparts?
Thanks for having me, Spoo. I think that the reality is that ultimately this debate wasn't that different than the other previous debate. It was just a little bit more civilized. There was some talk of substance, but I think the vice president was pretty consistent, telling a lot of sharing a lot of false information with the American public, pretty much the same as Donald Trump did in the last debate.
Now, obviously, Vice President Pence is the chair of the White House coronavirus task team, and we did expect that this was going to be a focal point in this debate. In terms of his arguments and defense, do you think that the ordinary American voter would have been convinced, given the statistics that we've seen in terms of the number of infections and deaths of Americans due to the coronavirus?
No, I don't think so, because I think ultimately, as you mentioned, there are over 200,000 Americans dead. There are millions of Americans who have been affected by the virus, by not just having the virus, but the economic impacts of the virus, which are known throughout the world, right? I mean, in South Africa here, it's quite significant as well. But I think that it's clear that he also tried to focus on the issue of closing the border with China, which is not really the significant problem. The problem is that they've been in denial. Ultimately, the last screen of the debate was very telling, right? His wife came on, and despite being a requirement that people are wearing masks at the debate, she didn't have a mask on. So I feel like that behavior says a lot about the position of the administration on the coronavirus. At the end of the day,
but do you think that would influence a voter? Just those optics of either wearing a mask or not, particularly now that we've seen that President Trump has just come out of hospital after having contracted the virus?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the mask has become clearly a culture clash point. But I also think the reality is the virus is running unabated in the United States. I read today in the state of North Dakota, which is a very tiny state, it's so bad that there's one ICU bed, one critical care bed left in the entire state, because there is a culture there of not wearing masks. There is a culture there of pretending like this virus isn't happening. And the reality is that in the places where that is occurring, you're seeing death, you're seeing families destroyed, you're seeing livelihoods destroyed, you're seeing that things are remaining problematic. And I think at the end of the day, I think the White House is seriously underestimating how concerned Americans are about the virus. Now,
Jill, let's talk about women in politics. Obviously, Kamala Harris comes into this presidential race, or in fact into this debate, with a number of firsts, and the fact that if Joe Biden is elected, she'll be the first African-American woman to occupy that position, actually even the first woman. How important is that a factor in this election?
Oh, I think it's significant because I think the reality is that America is becoming a more diverse nation. It's not. It is on its way to becoming that white people will not be the majority of people in the country, and I think people want the leadership of the country to be reflective of the nation, not just from a female perspective, but also from a racial perspective. She's African American. Her mother was Indian, and she is very representative, I think, where culturally America is headed. I also think that it's clear that, women in the United States are reaching new heights. If you look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who recently passed away, the way that she has paved the way for women is significant. Also, we know that women voters are a huge part of the equation in this election. In the last election, Donald Trump won suburban women and won women over the age of 50. And right now he's trailing both of those groups very badly.
All right, Jill Greenberg, don't go away just yet. Jill Greenberg is the communication and political strategist, and she's a former press secretary to Senator Bob Graham. Jill, we'll come back to you. I want to take us back to our panel here in studio. As we're saying, we're still getting a lot of reaction to that vice presidential debate, and we have my colleague Michelle standing by. Michelle?
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Spoo. In fact, I want to hone in on one of the issues that one of Spoo's guests addressed, in fact, the issue of trade. And Capri Cafaro talked about the reason why many Democrats would have changed their vote back in 2016 would have been around the issue of the economy. Now, Herman, we were chatting during the debate about the issues around, the third quarter GDP. If the election was about GDP in the third quarter, would Trump win? Also, the issue I wanted you to touch on, we've not seen Trump use the slogans that he used in 2016 around the fact that he's a very successful businessman, that he is the one, I was trying to do a Trump accent there, that he is the one that's going to change the lives of ordinary Americans through boosting the economy. We've not seen him focus on that at all.
Yeah, I think whenever I coach debating, whether it's at university level or school level, or even beyond that in terms of more political activity, one of the core things that I think you need to communicate is, and this sounds terribly gimmicky, but political communication often is gimmicky, you need a strong slogan as an argument. I always say that you've got a proposition, and then you've got the word because, and then you need your slogan.
Right.
If you can have your proposition, Donald Trump should be president of America, because he will make America great again. If that sentence reads coherently, I think you've got something to work with. And I think
so. MAGA was 2016.
Yes, it was 2016, and I think it worked well. Compare that to Hillary Clinton, whose slogan was "I'm with her." Hillary Clinton should be president of the United States of America because I'm with her. It doesn't add up. So it's not a good angle to attack messaging from. This time around, we kind of scratched our heads to
what is the slogan?
What is Trump's slogan?
Right.
He's so good at it. MAGA became the red hat, it became such a symbol, such a potent symbol. And I think those kind of symbols from the Trump campaign have been underused. I think the slogan is "Keep America Great," but that's a very difficult slogan. Yes, which of course, it sounds like a medical condition, but sorry, suffering from CAGA. But I think we also have a problem that if you have an economy in rapid decline, if you have a global pandemic, trying to make the argument that you must keep America great, it just doesn't wash. So I think from a messaging point of view, Trump is out of his depth on something that should be his home turf. On the GDP figures, the second quarter, if you look quarter on quarter, first quarter bad, second quarter worse, that creates a very low base for what should be, in strong economies like the UK and perhaps the US, a V-shaped recovery. Because in South Africa, we have fundamental weaknesses that were exposed by the COVID-19 crisis. I think in America, the fundamentals are much stronger. So you have a sudden drop in economic activity and then a relatively sharp uptick again. The UK seems to be in a sharp V-shaped recovery, at least for now. So we might see the third quarter stats look very, very V-shaped, where you go from a very low base, or where you go from good 3% GDP annual growth, plummeting in the first and second quarter, then going back up to where it would have been had there been no interruption, or at least where it, was on equal footing. And that could, if the Trump campaign are disciplined, they could use that and say, look, it's the Trump economy roaring back.
Yeah.
They should do that. I don't know if they could, but certainly that is a strong point that hopefully, or from the Trump campaign perspective, hopefully plays out. But a very interesting last thing from me on the trade point, I find it very interesting that Joe Biden and Senator Harris have made noises what would traditionally be considered to the right of the Republican Party on law and order and on trade, where the left of center political idea of trade was more protect your domestic worker and, shun foreign trade, we now have this odd reverse where Trump is more protectionist and the Democrats seem to be more pro-trade, and Joe Biden calling Donald Trump soft on law and order. I think that's a brave thing to do. I think it's a relatively smart thing to do.
Yeah, the law and order issue is a big one, but I just want to keep focus on the issue around economy, specifically in the U.S. Yesterday, news breaking, it would have been early on Wednesday in the U.S. that news broke around Trump's decision to end the COVID budget stimulus relief talks. Was that a bizarre decision, Lance, just given that he is running for a second term?
It was an absolute bizarre decision, because what he did, he took ownership of the collapse of the talk. He took ownership of it, so he can't back out and say it's not me. And then afterwards, I think he tweeted the following morning, but I'm available to give sign separate pieces of legislation. So by doing that, he paints himself into a corner. It wasn't in Pelosi and Schumer's interest. Nancy Pelosi heads up Congress, and Chuck Schumer is the lead Democrat in the Senate. And it wasn't in their interest to actually get a deal. They'll talk about getting a deal, but then they'll delay it and say, but now Trump has taken ownership of that issue. And then this could have been relief for so many Americans.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yes, they could have used that as a ticket. And the challenge with Trump is that he likes to take ownership of things, even things that he shouldn't take ownership of.
But I mean, the thing is, if there were those voters who perhaps were undecided, this would have been the thing to swing them away from the Republican Party.
It's always good for a government to hand money to its citizens before any election. Tax cuts, it works. It's a populist move. It works. Trust me. Yeah. Trust me. I can be bribed with a tax cut. If someone's going to give me a tax cut, I'll vote for you.
Listen, that's off the record.
That's what they do to all citizens. So they're going to give you a tax cut. If I can get a tax cut, if I can get some kind of rebate or something from a government, that's what I'll vote for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Bizarre move from President Trump just yesterday. Herman, I know you want to jump in there, but I'm going to ask you to wait for just a second. Sabu, you're still joined by Jill Greenberg, and she's got some interesting perspective, having worked in politics in the U.S. before. You want to continue that conversation?
Of course, Michelle, we still have Jill on the line with us, and I think we'll also be tracking that issue of the economy. Jill, we had two Americans coming on, David and Angelita, talking about when they were responding to the issue of climate change. They say, look, it is an important matter, but obviously to Americans, the economy matters more. Now, obviously, that being the case, we also have the issue of faith. Why is then faith or the one's previous or religious background so important in this debate and in this presidential election?
I think that it's become really important because I think that the Trump administration has utilized it as a device to maintain support. I think that evangelical voters have been the bread and butter of the Republican Party. And as the Republican Party, other constituencies in the Republican Party have fallen away, I think that the religious vote has become even more important. And I also think that core issues like abortion can also help keep them very in lockstep with the current administration.
Right, that's Jill Greenberg. Jill, thank you very much for your time, and we are looking forward to that election.